Honored to be able to share with our fellow participants, students, and panelists to share some of the works that we've done over the years, mainly my journey from school to research. I think following Anki and Mr. Lee's sharing, it's only fitting that I start from my high school experience. So I did my high school in Hong Kong in the Li Po Chun United World College, and that was actually my first research experience. I was doing my extended essay in the International Baccalaureate in chemistry, and that's my first experience of research. And after my high school, I actually went to a program not too unsimilar to the RSI program that Anki just shared about. But I didn't go to MIT. I actually went to Technion in Haifa in Israel. That summer, I think I was around 19 years old or so. It was a program called the SciTech. It's for secondary school students. And so during that summer, I spent around, I think, 2 months or so working very closely with my partner, also high school student, under supervision by a PhD student. And then all of us are supervised by a professor, of course. And we were working on this effect of noble metals on the photocatalytic efficiency of titanium dioxide. So titanium dioxide at the time was a very popular material for carrying out photocatalytic activities to remove organic compounds in air. And that was one of the topics that I was working on. And if you can see this picture with many people, I'm the one in the red box here. And so during that experience, I learned something about research. That was my first experience outside of my high school, studying kind of research in an independent research lab in a university. And my second experience was when I was doing my undergraduate studies. Of course, during the first 1 or 2 years, I was mainly taking courses, learning about the basic knowledge in my undergraduate studies. And then that summer, I actually came back to Hong Kong because I grew up in Hong Kong and my home was in Hong Kong. And when I studied in the US at Princeton, during summer, sometimes I also came back. And that summer, I was actually doing a research project in Clearwater Bay. I was also working in a lab there under a professor there, and I was working very closely with the research group there, consisting of both master students, PhD students, postdocs. And that summer, I was basically collecting a lot of different data. Also, actually happens to be related to titanium dioxide. Maybe because during my high school summer, I learned something about titanium dioxide. I wanted to continue, and I was using different analytical tools to analyze the samples that have been processed and exposed to catalytic effects of titanium dioxide. And then after that, I was also I'll continue my research journey. And during that experience, basically some of the things that I learned includes the following. So basically, my first experience, because I was new and I was basically helping the PhD students and my lab to collect data. And so I had to also read a lot of textbooks to learn the materials by myself. And also because of the partners that I have had. And very often we had to have very heated discussions or sometimes arguments, but these were all well-intended discussions to improve the science and to enhance each other's knowledge and understanding of a topic that was even unfamiliar to our supervisor. So I think it was very helpful experience that I learned there. And also there I had to, of course, follow what my PhD student told me to do and try to learn from him or her, but not just from him or her, but also learn how to learn to become more familiar on a topic that I didn't know at all before. And also I had to learn how to interpret the data that I collected by looking up some tables and following the scientific literature. And so these are some of the things that I learned during my first two experiences. Then my next experience was I was actually doing an independent project during my third year in my undergraduate studies at Princeton. I was in chemical engineering. At the time, I was working on a project called surfactant adsorption at solid-liquid interfaces. I was basically using atomic force microscopy, which is like a little needle that has a very small tip. And so it's like a finger that you try to touch across the entire surface to find out the surface roughness, topology, and also the mechanical properties of the different parts of the surfaces. And I was charged with using this tool and redesigning it so that it can be used to image in water on surface that has a very thin layer of some molecules called the surfactants. And these surfactants are present in a lot of places, like in soap and in our shower gels, etc., because they can bind to oily substances and help to emulsify them, meaning that turning them into smaller droplets so that you can wash them away. And basically, my study was arising from some observations in the literature that adding these surfactants to the surface of metals help protect it from getting corroded. And so my professor asked me to try and see if I could find out what actually happens there by imaging it. But at the time, this was something that nobody had done before. And I didn't even know what to expect, what I would be seeing if I see the results. So I could not even envision what I was looking for, but I just kept trying and trying. Basically, I kept failing for something like 9 months of very hard works because I didn't know what to expect. I had to first teach myself of what the problem is and what I am supposed to see if the experiments are working well. And these are some of the things that I learned. For example, hard work. I actually had to have an individual weekly meeting with my advisors. I had 2 advisors there at the time. It was usually Monday morning. And then on Thursday afternoon, we had this larger group meeting with my lab mates. So each of the lab mates takes turns to present week by week. So we may present once every 2-3 months. And then we also had a Friday meeting with the entire group where we update each other of the progress or of the questions that we have had during that week. So this is a typical week. So you can imagine some of the questions that were posed during the Friday meeting. I may be asked again on the Monday morning when I get the questions. So it's inevitable that I have to work over the weekend. But that basically got me very much engaged all the time about the research questions and projects that I had. And of course, I had to learn a lot because basically I could read textbooks and talk to my postdocs about how to do more conventional atomic force microscopy. But since no one had done what I was trying to do, so I had to learn by myself and read books and basically had a lot of trial and error, come up with a lot of new hypotheses and try to prove them to make progress on our problem. And so I also got to learn perseverance. The reason why I show this picture on the right, because it was one of the highlights during the experience. I finally could see some pattern on the surface of the metal. And initially, I didn't know what it was, but actually, if you see closely to the surfaces of these, you see a lot of things that looks like worms. Those are actually some of the worm-like micelles formed by the surfactant molecules that I mentioned about. So these molecules, they group together and aggregates into things that look like worms. And then they get attached onto the metallic surfaces. So that's why I show this picture that to this day, I'm still very proud of. And then another experience that I had after that was I was actually spending my summer before graduation from Princeton to do research at Harvard through the materials research initiatives there. So I got to work with experts there, and there I was trying to study how to make non-spherical elliptical particles. So most of the particles that we see are sphericals. And we tried to study the assembly of non-spherical particles. So the first step was how can we form non-spherical particles reliably with high reproducibility. So during that summer, I was charged with that task. So I was actually using a very simple or very crude method. I was putting all the spherical particles into a thin film and try to heat up the thin film so that the particles are also somewhat slightly deformable. And then I had to design something to pull the film so that the particles embedded are also stretched. And then I can control the degree of the stretching by pulling by different amounts so that I can vary the aspect ratio, which is the ratio of the length and the diameter. And in doing so, I could form lots of particles that are non-sphericals with controlled shape. And so that was my summer experience. And actually, during that time, because I was again trying to do something that people in the group had not done before, there were maybe other methods, other approaches that people tried elsewhere, but that was not the approach that we decided to pursue. So I had to keep asking people around what I could find, and basically keep trying and trying and trying and failing and failing and trying. Because it was again just a summer, time was very limited, and I wanted to be able to finish with something that I can have at least somewhat of a minor conclusion. So I had to work really hard during that summer as well. That was my another research experience. And actually, a few years ago, when I went back to Boston for the Materials Research Society meeting, I actually bumped into the person standing next to me was one of the key organizers of the program that I joined when I was an undergraduate student. So it was nice catching up with them. And then after that, I actually went to Harvard to do my PhD research. And there I was using microfluidics to form new materials. So microfluidics is referring to the ability to generate very small channels. The channels would be around the size of the diameter of your hair, or even smaller. And at the time, microfluidics was at its infancy during the beginning of my PhD period. So there were lots of open questions that people were asking. For example, how can you study the fluid dynamics in such small channels in a controlled manner? Because that could not be done before without the ability to fabricate such channels of such small size with high precision. And one of the questions that I was looking into was, how can we use these channels to make droplets that can be used as templates to form materials such as particles, capsules. So the videos that you see at the bottom here was our work in forming what we call double emulsion. So inside the channel, you see a droplet encapsulated by another droplet. So the smallest droplet was actually a water droplet surrounded by a oil shell, and the outermost liquid is also water. And there, we can then use these as templates to do encapsulations. We can put active ingredients into the smallest droplets, and we can use these templates to turn them into polymeric capsules, vesicles, liposomes, etc. So these are some of the things that I was doing. And the way that I learned during the time was basically, again, learn to read papers, learn to self-teach myself knowledge that I didn't know by reading books and papers until I understand. And we also had something called Journal Club, which is an occasion where we get together to read the latest papers that we are interested in and trying to pretend to be the author of that paper, to defend the work and to criticize the work. And also another thing that I learned was that whenever we had questions, we are not alone. We don't need to be shy. We can always try and contact the world's experts on the subjects to try and learn more about what they think and their insights. And that sometimes was very helpful. So these were some of the things that I learned. And then after that, I came back to Hong Kong. The right picture was actually a picture that I took with with the first members of my group. Many of those were undergraduates, and there was actually, I think, one high school students, and that was our kind of gathering. And the left left picture, you see Professor Choi there as well. That was actually in a ceremony by the Research Grounds Council of Hong Kong when I got the Early Career Award, and I took a picture with Professor Choi there. And then the group continued to grow after that, and we have more students graduating from my group, and some of them are now professors in different places. Actually, one of the person in this picture is actually now I think he just got tenured at the University of California, Santa Barbara, and we also have other graduates now at different universities, including University of Hong Kong, Shanghai Jiao Tong universities, and various places. So it was a very fruitful journey, and we get to work with a lot of very brilliant students. Actually, because of my own experience of learning how to do research and getting so much benefits and excitement and satisfaction out of it, I actually also accept high school students to do research experience in my lab every summer. So every summer we also have some high school student in my lab. So I'd just like to conclude by saying a few things that got me interested in research that I'd like to share. So the reason why I was interested in research, and I think this should also be the reason that a lot of people are interested in research, is mainly, firstly, curiosity. So you're curious at something, and researchers like us are extremely lucky because we get to have tools and have the resources and have the intellectual partners to work together to try to tackle some of the interesting questions based on our curiosity. That is something that is very fulfilling. And also we sometimes try to solve some of the problems that need solution. I'm sure Professor Cowling later on will share with you some related to this. And then, of course, we had a lot of fun doing so. I think curiosity often comes with fun. Even when I was doing my imaging using atomic force microscopy, when I was failing all the time, during the failure, each time I learned something more about the problem, about what I should do next. So the failures didn't feel like failure. It actually taught me something, and that was fun. And also, I think now, I think as a researcher, it's a very unique job where you can learn, earn, and return all at the same time. So I think this is a very fruitful career that I would encourage a lot of people to participate in. And of course, another thing that I think also was shared by Anki just now is that when you're doing research, when you're working with a group of people, you actually makes a lot of friends. And when you are engaged in research, you not only become friends with them, but you actually get to work with people who are much smarter than you are, like at least much smarter than I am. And so each day of working with them, I learn something, and it's actually very exciting. I wake up every day trying to think about what I could learn that day and who I get to work with. And that's always a fantastic feeling. And of course, collaboration is very important because nowadays the problems that need to be solved often are multidisciplinary, and you need expertise from different areas, and we can no longer afford to just confine our tools and our approaches to a single discipline. So we have to collaborate with the mindset towards complementing each other's strength, not overlapping, but by complementary strength. By working together, you learn and you get to solve the problem faster. And so I sometimes use this analogy with my students. It's like when we are collaborating, someone is blindfolded, the other one is sitting on a wheelchair, and you're trying to work together. You only see a little side of the puzzles. You only get a little bit of sense in different areas, but you get to navigate through the puzzle together. And in doing so, you may bump into the walls, you may even fall down sometimes, but it's the only way to find the way out is to work together and trust each other, and use our logic and understanding to grow. And of course, as I mentioned, during my research experience, I also had heated discussions and sometimes even arguments on the science and on the understanding and on the interpretations with my partners. It's important to realize that some of these criticisms actually enhance the rigor of the work and make the work more interesting. Of course, when we try to work with each other, when we try to unlock new knowledge, we have to be open to different suggestions, open to different possibilities, open to different hypotheses. And sometimes we have to realize that many of these criticisms are not to us personally, and there's no need to be very defensive, because defensiveness will sometimes kill further questions and comments from your potential collaborators and partners who may ask the questions that will eventually inspire the right solution to the problem. So being open is very important in that aspect. And so being able to criticize each other's work also mean that sometimes our works needs to be criticized by people outside. Many of the current academic research world work by peer review. So it's important to respect your peers, to contribute to the peer review and also benefit from the peer review, which will eventually improve the science. Of course, communications is very important. As scientists, we can get all the fun by satisfying our curiosity, by doing experiments, running numerical simulations, and understanding the problem theoretically. But that will be of no use to the society or to others if we don't communicate these new understandings. And we often do this by writings, by presentations, by drawing figures, animations, and now there are also lots of social medias, which is an arena that many young people like yourself are actually able to take much better advantages than we did. So I think by utilizing these different modes of communications, science can actually potentially be advanced to a different level. So with that, ultimately, of course, science brings satisfaction, and that is actually something very important. And on the right here is just a picture in a papers that we recently published. It was also related to droplets. It's a large droplet nucleating lots of smaller droplets, and these smaller droplets are actually able to collect smaller nucleic acid in the environment. So I just like to use this analogy to say that sometimes our curiosity breeds new questions, and the answers to the questions sometimes allow us to suck in new knowledge that can get integrated together to become even more powerful knowledge that can light up the environment. So with that, I'd like to thank again for the invitation and for the opportunity to share with you. If you have any questions, please feel free to type in the Q&A, and I'll try my best to answer. Thank you.